Right, it's another Saturday. Super excited to be here. And today we have our lunch and learn. Not lunch and learn, it's our question and answer session. I know I came on live, was it on Friday, yesterday? And we wanted to ask so many questions, and I decided to create this session so that we can have purely question and answer. It's time for you for us to learn together. Drop your questions on the channel when you come in, and at the same time, let us know where you're connecting from, so that we can give you a shout out while we are connecting and while we are still preparing to drop our question on the channel box. Now, let me pick up one stop and talk about it. Something which I think come up in most of our interviews and a lot of people still get confused with. Also, people that are on the job, they still get confused with and the role of a scrum master in release planning. So I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But while you come in, I want to know where you're connecting from. Just drop your question where you're connecting from. And also, if you have a question, start dropping them in there in less than no time. I'm going to be taking up those questions and we're going to be having a conversation about them. Now, release planning and the role of a scrum master in release planning, which is going to be our open up questions, right? That's a question from me. When we talk about release planning, it's more or less what we are going to call on. I always like to take stuff out of the scrum environment, and then we can explain from that aspect, and then we zoom it back into the scrum environment. I think that is an approach that helps us to kind of get it much better and more clearer. Now let's assume that um you you are a teller, right? And you take a contract for a university to produce a number of costumes to them, right? Let's say 50,000. Now, will you deliver all of those costumes in one day? Like, except you're a very big industry. Most often, you will plan to have a schedule on how to release those costumes, right? And maybe it's a 5 years contract with them. And each year you plan to deliver, let's say 4,000, 4,000, 4,000. Now, is what you're releasing to them at one time is how you kind of plan in your capacity. And your ability to release what you promise is based on if you have that capacity, right? So when we talk about release planning, we talk about what capacity, what are we going to release based on our capacity. So from the planning, release plan come after we have a product roadmap. So a product roadmap definitely give us an idea of the different features and the milestone we need to achieve. When we have the futures and the milestone, we now break it down based on our capacity, based on how many developers or how many team members you have and the ability to do the work. So because of that, we can now plan because we have 7 people in our team, and these 7 people can do this work at this period. And given the amount of work we have, we'll be able to complete X by this period, X by this period, X by this period, X by this period. If I use another example to kind of give you an idea of when we talk about release planning, let's take, for instance, we're building a 7 story building. Now, when you take a contract with the customer, you plan to say, okay, we're going to finish the foundation by this period. We're going to finish the decking by this period. We're building all the plumbing work by this period. So they can evaluate. The reason you're able to give them that timeline is because you understand the capacity or the number of workers you have. So based on that, we can establish our release planning. Now, what is the role of a scrum master in release planning, or what should the scrum master be doing in terms of release planning? First, if you don't have an agile coach in your company, then you'll be the one to facilitate the release planning. But the release planning should be facilitated in relation to the tech lead, the agile coach, and the product manager and the PO because they understand this technicality. If you don't have an agile coach, then you might replace the agile coach. Now, if you are in a safe environment, then there is somebody called the release train engineer who coordinate all the releases, because a release in a safe environment is more of a system than multiple teams. So you, the scrum master, you can only kind of tack what your team need to do in terms of the PI objective. That's what you're focusing on. But in terms of the releases, it's going to be the release train engineer coordinating that with the product management, with the system architect, and all of that. When it comes to the level of the team, now when stories or futures attack into releases, what exactly does that mean? Let's say that we plan to release a future. Let's say we're working on a banking app, and we want to make sure that we have a future on the app that can help students to be able to start paying their student loan, and we want to make that available to them before the start of 2023. Then there are certain activities that need to be done before that story is released out for students to start working on, right? So we need to make sure that as Scrum Master, we need to make sure that we look at all the different stories that need to be part of that release and follow up closely that we will be able to complete it. You can go on create a release panel which is on your board, and you can stack all of this story into this release panel, so that on one click on your release panel you can be able to see what is left and what need to be done. And the day of the release, you definitely just follow up with your team and look at what has been completed, what pulled back from the system. And just to clarify, release doesn't take place on your Scrum board or on your Jira board, Rally board, or so. Now, the Rally board, the Jira board, the Azure DevOps board, they're only two for you to track to see what is going on. The actual work is going up in an environment we call a staging environment. So, in that case, you are only looking using that as a checklist. I always say for instance, you want to go to the shop. What are you going to have? A checklist. When you do something, you check. But are you putting those items on that checklist? No, the items are going in the cart. So what is happening when you are facilitating events using your board, using the Jira, Ravi, is that those are like the to-do list. When a developer say have completed, it means they actually bought the item, they put it in your basket. Now, for some reason, you, the Scrum Master, might not have the technicality to have access to the basket. The product owner most often have access to the staging environment. Right. So when we clarify that, we understand what release planning is all about and what is your role as a Scrum Master in release planning. So if that is good, then we can go into our session today. Today, Saturdays are purely questions and answer, and which is why I love them. I love to learn about what are some of the questions we have on board and how we can handle that as a team. So go ahead and start putting down your questions and answer, and let's see how many questions we can be able to take for today. All right, and thank you for everyone that's joining in. And do a favor and also kind of click the share button. I know quite a lot of people would like to jump in and ask their question as well. So the first question is coming in from are they they say, as a scrum master joining a team transitioning to agile, what's the best way to approach that? I have an interview on Monday. Now you're joining a team and the team is transitioning to agile. You want to, number one, you want to make sure that the team understand the basics of agile. What do I mean by understanding the basics of agile? Remember, if you get into your environment and your team doesn't understand agile, as a scrum master, what you need to do is to create protocols. You create protocols that can help you train them effectively well. If you can create all of these protocols that can help you to train your team well, first you get them grounded into the concept. The second thing you want to do is that always have to establish a working agreement if it's a new team. If it's an existing team with a working agreement, then the person who is onboarding you, or you always have to ask any of your team member if they already have a working agreement. If they already have a working agreement, then you need to enforce that. A working agreement kind of specify all the rules. What should we do? What is the cadence of our meetings and all of that? So as a scrum master joining a new team, that should be your focus. And these are the stuff that you should be focusing on them if you join a new team. Right. So that was the question for from a day. So if you have your question, put it on the chat box while we are working on that. Now, another question which also normally regularly is coming up now. They always ask you as a Scrum Master, what is your resource? The question seems a bit very big vague, but then you want to take that from the perspective of a Scrum Master. What is your resource as a Scrum Master? As a Scrum Master, it simply means where do you pull your inspiration, your knowledge from, right? As a Scrum Master, the first point, our first go-to point, it's a Scrum guide. So we can always refer to the Scrum guide for our resources. Apart from the Scrum guide, you should be able to listen to podcasts. You should join a community of practice. For instance, we have a community of practice. That's a situation that you can learn as well. If you are part of the safe community, you want to also make sure that you're also in a community group because there's always a lot of learning on sharing ideas in there. As a Scrum Master, you should have at least one book. You should have at least one book that are reading. One book that you are reading. A couple which I can recommend. You can look at. I think I have one right here, which I can recommend for our Scrum Master. It's Scrum, the Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half a Day, right? It's written by one of the founder of Scrum. So you probably might want to do that, read that book. It kind of get more clarity on that. I think the other one which I always recommend for all Scrum Master is Agile Project Management for Dummies. And I need to find out who is the author of that book. Let me see if I got that book here. Right here, Agile Project Management for Dummies. You also want to get this by Mark Layton. These are some of the books which you want to get as a Scrum Master. And in interviews now, they want to kind of really see if you're being part of this, if you're also investing in yourself and what are you doing to invest in yourself as a Scrum Master. So Scrum is all about continuous learning. It's very important for you as a Scrum Master to focus on what you can learn or what you should be or what can I learn, what new things can I learn. But when you focus on what you can learn, the possibility of you positioning yourself ahead of the market is very, very important. You stand high chances. Now what you can learn, it's different from what you listen to. You will agree with me that no matter how long you listen on videos, YouTube on how to drive a car, you can never drive a car. So I always advise everybody, do everything possible within your capacity to make sure that you're not only listening to YouTube video, you're also part of a community that is practicing Scrum. That is going to help you stand out. Now, another question which also came up in our community of practice today, the question says that if you are joining a new team as a Scrum Master, now if you are a Scrum Master of a team and the PO is joining the team and the PO doesn't have any prior knowledge on Scrum, how are you going to deal with that PO as a Scrum Master? So that's a very important question. Uh, You can also put your own response on the chat as well. That's one question. I'm going to read most of those questions for you to know. So I probably might come back to answer them. Let me read most of those questions that came up for you to give me your own answer. What you think should be the answer. So the first one was you are. I'm gonna pull that out. Okay, if a new PO joins the team who doesn't understand much about Scrum, how would you help him? That's the question. The next question says that if a PO is a bit pushy and asking your team to deliver a user story in between the sprint, what would you do? That is introduction of work in the middle of the sprint. The next question says that mention some of the retrospective technique as a Scrum Master. What are some of your retrospective techniques? The next question says that how much are you aware about Scrum? The next question says that difference between lead time and cycle time. The next question say that how to improve productivity in your team. The next question says that what you cover in a product backlog other than stories and bugs. What you cover in the product backlog other than story and bug. I definitely want to answer this question. So, the product backlog, we understand that the product backlog capture all the items or after all the items that we need to deliver or we need to use in order to build the future. So everything that is in the product backlog help us to work towards the realization of the realization of the future we're building. So the question says that apart from stories and bugs. What else can you have in the product backlog? The product backlog should also include non-functional requirements, right? Non-functional requirements are maybe action items that are coming in from your retrospective that will help the team to improve. So the backlog should also have those items. Non-functional requirement can also be some of the guidelines that can help you to effectively write your stories well. So they should include non-functional requirements, and non-functional requirements also include action item coming in from the product back from the retrospective, and also ideas or documents that can help you to perform well as a team. All right, the next question talk about prioritization backlog, prioritization technique. The next question talk about conflict management. I'm just reading the list of all the possible questions that you should be expecting um, in your interviews, right? And the one say, what different KPIs have you used, and which one do you think are the most effective one in your experience? All right. So KPIs are used in measuring performance, right? They're more like what are the performance indicator, or how do you measure the performance of your team? KPI simply means key performance indicator. Key performance indicator. Now, uh, we also have KOR, key objective result. KOR, key objective result. Now, with KPIs, you want to be looking at the velocity chart. You want to be looking at the burn down chart. You want to be looking at the spring report. These are some of the KPIs that you probably use. If you have a defect log, is more like just where you document the number of defects that are coming in. Now, for you to effectively measure if your team is doing well, it's not just about how much work the team is able to complete. It's also if the team is completing much work and we have a growing backlog of defect, it means that they're not building in quality, so their performance is also low. While we're looking at the velocity chart to see how that the number of story points they are completing, they're high, we also looking at are they having a lot of technical debt. Now, one of the aspects which a lot of people don't really kind of pay so much attention, and it's a very powerful tool for measuring the performance of your team, is called the happiness index. Happiness index simply means that your team is able to just come on a Zoom and everybody is happy. They can turn on their video, they can joke around. If all your team come on and say, "Oh, yesterday I do this," and everybody's out and you're waiting for another meeting, that's also another an indication that your team is not performing. Remember, a Scrum team is a self-organizing team. If you're self-organizing, it means there need to be a level of collaboration. If not, A will be waiting for B to do something, B will be waiting for C to do something. Now, something which a lot of people do not talk about a lot, and I know that's also because it's not part of the Scrum guide, is what we call throughput. A throughput, like you're going through, right? You're driving through. Throughput simply some organization also level throughput for measurements. Now we'll talk about throughput. It simply means that we're not looking at the velocity, because the velocity is not the number of stories completed, it's the number of story points. Now throughput is the number of story completed. We are not talking about the points there, just the number of stories completed in a sprint. That is called your throughput. And some organizations say, look, you know what? We don't want to look at story points, we want to look at throughput. And if you're in an organization where they only look at throughput, what you should pay attention to make sure that we have an average number of the stories are sized averagely. The story are sized, the range at which we size the story. Let's say advocate that okay, a story should not be above 3 stories point. In that case, if we say we complete 15 stories, we can have an idea of uh, the expected story point. But let's say we have 8 story point, we have 1 story point. It's going to be difficult for you to have a true estimate of what, right? Okay, let me pick up other question from the bot. Can you tell me when you have handled conflict with your team? All right, conflict can be from anywhere, but conflict simply means that we disagree, right? Conflict simply means that we disagree. So, most common conflict you want to talk about might be you had a situation which a team member wasn't constantly attending daily stand up. How is that a conflict? It's a conflict because it affects the performance of a team. So conflict is any something that affect the way people relate. Just imagine we all agree to come to a meeting, then one person doesn't show up and we don't do anything about it. That is going to start affecting other team members and they would think it's okay for us not to absent. So it might really affect the whole team. And how you handle that is to be able to help that person understand the value of the present, even if they don't want to, for the sake of the team, they should be able to compromise, not compromise, they should be able to see reasons why they should come there. Number one, for the sake of the business goal, when we're in a team, we need to keep our individual differences aside and focus on the overall team goal. And this is the reason why working with a team agreement is very important, because a team working agreement, one of the major line that should be there should be that um, are we not, now if the team decide on something which is against my will, I will not block my team by going contrary. That's one big item which you want to allow your team really go through that. You want to allow your team ensure that if majority accept, even if it conflict with my person, I need to be okay to do that, right? In that case, we're looking at shared interests. The next question says that what metrics have you used to increase team productivity? Now, for you to increase team productivity, I think it's not about you using the metric. Team productivity is about understanding, number one, using the metrics to understand what are the different aspects that are holding your team back. So, for you to evaluate performance, you can look at the velocity chart, the bend down chart as well, the spring report. But for you to increase productivity, you are using data from these matrices to look at how you can improve. Let's say that your team is having a poor velocity, which means that they're not able to complete your story on time. Now, based on the way your velocity chart is reading, you are going to use the retrospective to understand why your team is lagging. So you're not just going to figure out an answer. During the retrospective, you'll be able to have a conversation with them and understand, okay, team, when I look at our board, we see that we have not been able to perform as really expected during the last spring or during the last couple of spring. What can we do in order to improve our performance? So you work with your team. And that is why as a Scrum Master, it's not about you doing that. Like this question says, what metrics have you used? Now you can initiate because you understand how to use these metrics, but it's all about the effort of the team to make sure, because even if you come and tell them what to do and they don't believe in that, they were not part of that, they will not want to um they will not want to get into any change. All right, so we've been looking at a couple of questions, which was also part of our session today. And let's have a couple of other questions come in, and I'm going to put 3 more questions as well. And we are going to wrap it today, Saturday, which I'm going to read through. But if a question which I think is very important for you to understand, I'm going to answer them. The next question says, how do you ensure that estimate of a user story is done correctly? Okay, very, very, very important. The first thing is that you need to help your team to understand how to estimate. How do we estimate? We estimate based on the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci or the adjusted Fibonacci sequence is a series of numbers ranging from 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, 40. Right. Now, for you to help your team estimate, you want to focus on the effort required to complete the story. Number one, you start by working with your team. Let them find any piece of work or storing your backlog item, which can be completed in less than a day, and let them call that a one. Any other story point is estimated in relation to that story, which is a one. So in that case, they should be able to know what is the effort that is needed. Now we do understand that the more we increase in the number of story points, the higher the uncertainty, which is the reason why it's advisable to keep your story sizing actually small so that we can encourage flow. One of the biggest challenge when we have bigger story point like eight, like five, is that in most of the story points, we build in the testing capacity as well. So if your story point is eight and involved within that eight, it involves, let's say, 5 points for the development work and 3 points for the QA work. You realize that if you are delayed on your own part as a developer with one day, that story will spill over. But if a story point is three, including both development and testing effort, that story can be completed right ahead of time. Right. So the way you also help your team to estimate, and another idea you can also give your team for them to do the right estimate, you can help your team to do the right estimation by helping them to understand that, look, the reason we split down stories is to make sure that we can effectively test them. Just imagine that you want to do a piece of work that require about 20 different tests for you to validate. If one of them fail, you need to constantly go back, right, and perform that until all of the 20 different tests that need to go through are validated. But we split down the story point to ensure that a story only contains maybe one or two unit testing. In that case, we can easily just run one test and validate that this part is right. We do the other one. That is the goal of incrementally building a product. So, very important. The next question says that if you ask to tell your experience, how do you go about this question? Now, tell your experience simply means tell me about yourself. We tell me about yourself, I recommend three components. Now, the first component is not always to start with a Scrum project, it start with your overall project. Hello, my name is Peter, and I have about 20 years of experience. It cut across this number of departments. The second component is your transition story. My interest in Agile happened when I was working on this. Then I figured out that I needed some leadership skills, or I was working with this company and they wanted to adopt Agile. And I was fortunate to be trained to be part of the team. And then you talk about your Scrum experience. In the past 4 years, I've worked with four different Scrum teams, but my most recent project is about building XYZ for this team. And in this case, also talk about one achievement. One of my biggest achievements as a Scrum Master have been to help my team achieve uh, um, better performance whenever I join the team. Right. So this is very important for you to highlight that. The next question says, how can you build confidence as a Scrum Master? All right. Confidence is built when you increase your knowledge. The first way to build confidence is to improve on your technical know-how. Read more books, do more practical, join more knowledge sharing group, invest in yourself. That's how you build confidence. Confidence don't just come by you sitting and doing nothing. Now you realize that if I ask a question, what makes you put your hands up, raise your hands up to answer that question is you're confident. And what makes you raise your hand up? Because you know the answer. If you don't know the answer or you know a bit about it, your level of confidence would not really be that much. Like you're going to be shaky, right? So you build your confidence by learning more, by investing in yourself, by reading books, by participating in conferences, and just by trying to do it. In that way, you can effectively build your confidence as a Scrum Master. Now, another question is, what do you understand by the word MVP, minimum viable product? And so MVP, minimum viable product. Remember, There's no real business person that will just build a product and start selling. Before a business build a product, they're going to build something to test to see if it actually works. Most often, the testing might remain internally. They may just build something and give all the staff to try it, give their feedback before they ever send it out. So when they're building for testing, they don't so much use too much materials and quality because they are aware of this is costing us a lot. So a minimum viable product simply means that we are a product is it's acceptable to a point where we can test if the users are going to like it or not, but it has deficiency. It has deficiency in terms of built-in quality, but it's acceptable in a way that we can test and see if the features are working. All right, perfect. So that is I'm gonna do two more questions, and that's gonna be it for today, right? It's a Saturday, so it's a quickie one for today. Um, when it comes to Jira, can you tell me about any plugin that you currently actively use? When it comes to Jira, can you tell me about any plugin that you currently actively use? Okay, now plugin are software that are externally linked to, right? That's a plugin. So it's not part of Jira, but it's linked to Jira. Most Jira will link up Confluence on Jira. So that's a plugin. You can link up Confluence in Jira. From Jira, if you have a Slack page, you can link up it there. You can even link up your teams into Jira. So those are some of the plugins that you can link to Jira. Now, another plugin for Jira, most especially for those who are working in a safe environment, Jira Align is also a plugin that can help to track dependency, and that can also help to track um, uh, dependency defect, and also have the administrator have more visibility into your team. What query have you used in Jira? Now, Jira query languages are more like commands, right? For instance, you can use a query story open plus you use the person name that is building that story. That's a query. Jira query language is more like a shortcut, right? For instance, if you're typing and you use Control V on your keyboard, it produces an effect. So Jira query language simply help you to find something open. You can say find story. So story plus open ticket plus you put the time. It should be able to pull out what is a query. Jira query language. There are a couple of keys which you can use, right? You can actually look up one or two keys to learn about that, but that's something I'm going to leave you to learn about. Just go type 5-stop Jira query language, and you can have a mastery of that. What are the different type of report you pull out of Jira and how that is done? All right. The report in Jira, you can have your velocity. Your velocity report actually the work your team committed to and the work your team committed to and the one they completed. It shows you we started with this number of story points, we completed this number of story points. On the other side as well, you can also look at your spring report. Your spring report shows you an overall of what story were completed, how many story were carried over. So it goes more detailedly and show you that. You can look at your bend down chart. Your bend down chart simply show you the movement and the completion of stories. If a story was added, it was removed, the bend down chart show you that. The bend up chart also show you how you're progressing. So it's the opposite of the bend down chart. You simply put them by exporting them, right? You can put them by exporting them. You go there, it's a link you can export to a Word document or so. Or you can just do a screenshot of that and then put on your on your Microsoft PowerPoint presentation if you need to present to any stakeholder. How do you manage dependency as a Scrum Master? Now, what's dependency? Dependency simply means that let's say that you want to go to the market, right? and you cannot go to the market because you're waiting for your dad to come home and give you some money. So you're going to the market depends on you waiting on your dad. The same thing with stories on Jira. The reason we do story mapping or the reason we do a release planning and all of that is because we cannot complete some piece of work until we complete another one. If we're building a house, you cannot start roofing until you raise all the wall. So dependency simply means that what do we need to do before some of the stories are blocked because we need to first of all build this future before we can build this future. How do you manage that? A couple of ways you can manage that. You can manage that simply by communication. You have a list of dependency. You can put them on a conference page, and you constantly double check and manage that. You can manage that by using also an option in Jira called link. Right? You can be able to link a story, but then even if you link and you don't have somewhere that you track it on, you still going to be able to you will not still be able to follow that up. So you can link the story so that you click on one story, you can see what the story is dependent on. You can also have a dashboard, and in that dashboard you can be able to create all dependency. You can be able to put all stories that have dependency on that dashboard, and you can easily track them. So it's more or less how to make that visible and how you can effectively track those dependencies. All right. The next question says that how do you keep your team motivated? Okay. So, what makes someone to be motivated is by you understanding their value and making sure that you relate with those values. Now, value is not just about what they do at work. Now, for instance, uh, Gabo, if I want to find out what can keep you motivated, it's about finding out what you like apart from work, right? Maybe you like watching football. Now, in that case, I can always use that as a means to pull a conversation with you. Now, you also keep your team motivated by improving communication, creating an environment, just putting Joe. You can also keep your team motivated by using We Connect Card. This is, I recommend this for Scrum Master, We Connect Card. It has like a lot of games. You can just pick a card and then read, which is more about getting to know your team better. When people get to know themselves better, they're always motivated. It's just the same as if you pick your phone now and you want to talk to, let's say you want to talk to a friend, right? A friend which you've missed for a long time. You're motivated to talk to that friend. You can go on and on. You pick your phone and you want to talk to someone you barely know. You can barely pull a conversation for 2 minutes, right? Because they're not motivated talking to you. So when you build relationship, the motivation become high. Yes, Samuel, I'm gonna return your call. Thank you. All right, perfect. So those are our top questions for today, and thank you for connecting. I think we answered a lot of questions today, right? And if you have more questions, just go drop them in the comment box, and I'm going to make sure I handle that early next week. Okay. Now for couple of announcements, our next safe certification class is starting on the 28th. For those who want to be safe certified, you can plug in. For those who you're looking for a community where you can practice and learn more of this practical stuff, also reach out to me via text, and I should be able to give you more directive and more information on what it takes to join our community. So for those who, if you texting me, and if you text me, don't call me, please just send a text with, and I will, if it's something I need to call you, I'll call you. As many people can attest that if you send a text and what you need to call, I will call. The reason I would say no, don't call, because if you call, I'm in a meeting. For instance, someone you call was in a meeting, then after I'm jumping into this meeting, so by the time I come back, I might not remember to call you. But if you send a text, that text, I can come back and read that text and respond to it. If you send a text and I don't respond to it, send a follow-up text. If you send a text and maybe after 2, 3, 4 hours or so on the day I don't respond to that text, simply know that it kind of went down the list. Just send a follow-up text and I should be able to respond to that. Okay, so meanwhile, thank you for everyone for joining. And oh, I have one other question which I still need to answer. So that's a question from Ola, and Ola says, "Can you please tell us the major difference between backlog refinement and iteration planning?" Yes, there's a major difference. Backlog refinement, you are getting ready, you are arranging the stories, you are getting ready, you are prioritizing them. Now, let's say that you have an occasion happening tomorrow, Sunday. Now, today you're going to spend time making sure everything is in place. You're putting together everything. You're getting ready, right? But it's not yet the occasion day. But spring planning is like the occasion day. The occasion day, you have almost everything ready. Then you still go through and double check to make sure that during the night people do not move chairs and other stuff. Just arrange them and you launch your occasion. So backlog refinement, we are making sure that the stories are ready. We are going through the stories, we are estimating them, we are prioritizing them in order in which they are going to come. Now with spring planning, if we did not have a backlog refinement, this day of the spring planning, we still have to do all of this. So backlog refinement help us not to get into surprises, right? Just imagine you were thinking you have 50 chairs, and the day of your occasion you realize you only have 25. What's going to happen? You get into a panic mode. But if you actually plan, let's say a day before, and realize, oh, I have just 25 chairs, you have a window to make a couple of calls. So backlog refinement help us to find out, get ready, find out if we're missing something, and then look for ways on how we can move that up. All right, perfect. So yes, Samuel, I'm gonna give you details on when that next session is starting. The next session is starting. Let me see when the next session is starting. Right. The next session is starting on the 28th, but I'm going to share more information on that for you to get that. All right, everybody, it's time for me to hop out and see you. Have a great weekend and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.